All right, we still got 3 or 4 more seats up front if anybody wants to try and grab them in the back. You don't have to stand, but your choice. All right, want to thank everybody for coming out tonight. Really appreciate it. So I got a couple of kind of little announcements. My name's Chris Thompson. I'm the founder of Sharatoga TechTalks, as well as Sharatoga Co-working around the way. So as you can see on the screen, we are trying to brand Sharatoga TechTalks. So we got our little hashtag of Saratoga Tech. There is a growing tech scene. I'm talking to the people that are in the tech scene, that are developing the tech scene, so you all know what I'm talking about. But anyone that this might be their first time here, awesome, great, raise a hand. Love it. And actually, I think probably we have about half of our people that RSVP tonight were brand new faces, so that is very, very exciting. We started about, let's say, 4 or 5 meetups ago. This is our 5th meetup. Last September we started. And we started with, I think, 25 people. And I didn't even know if anybody would show up, so I bribed pretty much 25 friends to attend. And we have grown every single month since with 0 advertising. Simple social media, meetup, just kind of pulling some people in. So we're using the hashtag Saratoga Tech. And our meetup has met a couple of exciting milestones. So this is what happens when I try and read off a sheet of paper. We now have 183 members in our meetup group with, again, 0 advertising. Tonight's event is our 5th, will be our 5th successful meetup. We had 53 people RSVP'd when I checked earlier this afternoon. That's phenomenal. I think last month we had 42, the month before that, 30. So again, just awesome outpouring of support from the tech community here. And again, I started this just with a couple of friends thinking, hey, wouldn't it be cool if we sat down, heard some people from the local community talk about something tech-related that would blow my mind. And I've been, happy ever since. So I really appreciate that. Shameless plug for Sharatoga Co-working right around the way. Again, so that kind of actually started with another group of people that are in the office today, in the audience today, looking for a place to work in downtown Saratoga. A lot of us had small startups or worked remote for companies in New York, Silicon Valley. There was no co-working space in Saratoga. We pleaded with people to please create it. The chamber said, oh, we'll create it. It's too expensive. We don't want to do that. I looked around and there was no one else to create it. I said, okay, I guess it's going to be me. And luckily by that point, I had a strong group of people surrounding us, and we decided to all just go in. So we rented a space, got it renovated. It's 368 Broadway, right across from Druthers. Can't miss the red signs in the windows. And we're holding kind of an open house next Friday. Usually Fridays, we try and get a group of people together, and we go out to lunch. Might sound corny, but that's kind of the idea. If you work remote and you wish that you were around people once in a while whenever you choose, it's kind of just a nice way to kind of get out of the house, meet other like-minded people, and an excuse to day drink. Okay, next announcement. This month, we're trying something new. So I have made a couple investments in some digital recording video, a couple GoPros. So tonight's event will be recorded. I'm saying this because there's a camera up there, shot of the audience to get our Q&A. And there's a camera right here. If you don't want to be recorded, leave. That's kind of the... If you stay, you are thereby giving rights, and I'm sure there's lawyers in the audience, so we can go like that. The goal, and I've never edited video, I've got a couple people that offer to help. The goal is that within a week from now, we will have up on our new to be created YouTube channel a full-length video of tonight's presentation, as well as individual snippets of each presenter, so that they can then take that, put them on their own sites, their own social media, evangelize it, help to build their brand. This being our 5th, we recorded previous ones, but the quality was shit. So what we're going to do is probably before the next meetup, do a couple of mock presentations of previous people that have done presentations, just kind of capture that, and there'll be no audience shots, or maybe I'll use this as a candy audience shot. So, last month we made an announcement that we love the idea of looking for sponsors, but we hate the part of looking. So, if any of you work for companies that do sponsor these kind of meetups or these kind of events or something like that, I have exactly 0 experience in raising sponsorship. But surely there are people that have come up to me in the past and said, hey, if you had an event, I'd like to sponsor. And I can't seem to find those people now. So you know how that goes. So, so again, we have no idea what sponsorship might look like, but we certainly are interested in it. We have also outgrown this space. So this space has a capacity of 35, and we are standing room only again. Saratoga is blessed with having very little commercial office space for rent as well as apartments. There are also no good places to meet beyond this free room brought to us by Harvey's Pub. So if anyone could think of a place within walking distance of Broadway, so that gives us like a 2 square block radius that can give us a free venue or a restaurant that I could negotiate some kind of deal with. The idea of bringing 52 people on a Wednesday night in the middle of February is probably pretty attractive to many restaurants. So that's kind of the thought behind that. And lastly, so this goes right to the audience. So I'm sure there are people in the audience tonight. Maybe it's your first time, maybe you come a couple of days and you've thought to yourself, wow, I could probably do a presentation. That'd be pretty neat. I've got something I'm passionate about that people might want to hear about. I'm looking for you. So this is only successful if I get people from the community to come up and present. So tonight we've got 2 people that are going to come up and tell us a little bit about something they're working on to kind of like help bring together the tech community. And then we've got 3 presenters that are talking about like pretty diverse topics. And that's what I really love about these tech talks, is that I can sit in the audience and hear about something that I had no idea that someone in our community here was working on this in their spare time, and that someday it might turn into a startup or a successful company or just a really kick-ass Kickstarter or video game. So that's what kind of like really gets me going, gets me volunteering my time each month. So if you have something you'd love to present, please come see me. We have exactly 0 presenters for next month. So if you want to have a tech talk next month, I need to get somebody, and I'm sure Mad Glory will volunteer 1 person. It's a company of like 12 people, and we go through 1 Mad Glory person each month, pretty much. So, but if for any reason you see us back here on March 18th, which is the 3rd Wednesday of March approximately, and we don't have any presenters, you're going to hear me talk for an hour, and you don't want that. So, all right, that is enough of my announcement. I've spoken way too long. So first up, we have Darren. She is going to come on up here. And she's going to talk a little bit about TEDx Youth event in Saratoga that she's looking to put on this spring. That's not you. This is you. There you go. Yeah, okay.
Okay. Hello, my name is Darian Rodriguez, and I'm the curator of TEDx Youth at Saratoga Springs. I'm sure most of you are already familiar with TED. TED stands for Technology, Entertainment, and Design. It brings together all the strong thinkers and doers in a community to spread ideas that matter in any field, whether it be science, engineering, technology, entertainment. And in the spirit of ideas worth spreading, TED has given me license to host an independently organized event, the TEDx event, right here in Saratoga Springs. Now, this event is targeted towards the young people, the youth, because I am still a youth, and so TED is very excited to have me on board to get all the young, strong thinkers and doers in this community to come to this event and to hear speakers who have advice to share or insight into an industry. And what we aim to do is bring the young people in this selfie mentality. Now, who here takes selfies? I know I take a lot. And I know, and I know that we're in this generation of a selfie mentality where people are focused and self-aware in their own interests and what they like, whether it be on Instagram, on Facebook. People are becoming more aware of themselves and their imprint on the internet and the way they interact with others. And so I want to bring together this selfie mentality and get young people thinking about how their likes, their interests, their passions can align in their career choices, whether it be an unconventional education route or more of like a cookie cutter way of being. Now, the people coming to this event are people who are not necessarily young people. I mean, we are targeted towards the 13 to 23 age range based on the kind of speakers we're bringing on board. But this is an event for people to gather and hear about the innovative ideas happening in the technology field. People will be discussing some management tools, which will be helpful to anybody working in a startup or who wants to review maybe some of their own management techniques and kind of see how these new ideas could apply to what they're doing. People coming to this event are people who are interested in hearing ideas worth spreading, and that's the TED motto that we're bringing through this event. I know this tech talk is kind of the exact feeling that we have with these tech talks, or what we're trying to bring to the TEDx event. And the people coming to speak are people We've got representation from Mad Glory, from the Tech Talks, from Price Chopper. We have people in diverse fields speaking about things that they're passionate about and sharing that with the young people. This event is scheduled to take place April 18th at the Gannett Auditorium on Skidmore campus from around 5:30 to 7:30 p.m. Tickets will go on sale next month, and that's something that I think you'll all be very excited and looking forward. But again, it's an evening that will bring together community to nurture this selfie mentality, to nurture the young mind and how do I fit in what it is I want to be doing. And that's something I'm very passionate about and something I'm excited to bring to this community. And so I appreciate this time to give you guys a little promo about what it is I'll be doing. And if you have any questions, or if you yourself feel like you have advice to share in what it is you're doing, or if you are someone who watches TED Talks for hours and hours like I did and want to get involved, talk to me. If you've got any questions or anything you want to share, I'm here to listen. And I appreciate you listening to me. And with that, I'll hand it off to the next person. So that's pretty much it.
Any questions? Great, perfect. So next, Shannon's going to come up and talk a little bit about Saratoga Makerspace. She's kind of involved in kicking off. So
thanks. Hi. Boy, it is standing room only. This is great. Good for you. My name is Shannon Oborn. I don't know very many people here. I see a lot of unfamiliar faces, so I assume I'm unfamiliar to you as well. If you were expecting Sharon Osbourne, I'm sorry to disappoint. But I hope that the story I have to tell is at least as exciting. Many of you, I think, are familiar with the concept of a makerspace, but it is a fairly new concept, and I know from a couple of months of talking with folks about this that often people do not know what that term means. It's just new to them. So I wanted to start just by kind of defining that, talk a little bit about kind of where I'm coming from and what I'm hoping to do, bringing together a group here in the community. A makerspace is basically a community workshop, and it brings together all sorts of different tools and educational programming, creative programming that kind of help explore the intersections of technology and design. It's funny listening to Chris talk and Darian. It's like I know we're talking about a lot of the same things, and that's good. It's like bringing these minds together and trying to kind of create some ways in the community to coalesce around that. Hopefully our makerspace will be a space that's big enough for this growing group, although 2 blocks from Broadway is a pretty tough requirement. It is. But in any event, the notion of a makerspace is very, very similar to a fitness club, actually, where people might choose to pay a monthly membership fee in order to have access to a lot of equipment and expertise that they wouldn't normally have access to in their homes, and also to have access to a community for either education or training or just fellowship or social gatherings. And so very similar concept here, except instead of elliptical equipment and fitness equipment, we've got wood shop, metal shop, 3D printing, welding. There's a whole list here, robotics and electronics, all under one roof, with the idea that you bring together these multidisciplinary people who have a lot of various interests and start to kind of develop a broad skill set, share ideas, help each other figure out how to create and innovate, and hopefully drive some collaboration. In a nutshell, that's what a makerspace is all about. We have a makerspace in the region, a really good, successful one, in fact, in Troy. It's called the Tech Valley Center of Gravity. And any familiarity with that makerspace? Excellent. Okay, great. So that's actually the model that I have had the most exposure to, and the one that inspired me to try to bring it here to Saratoga. So I do encourage folks there too to kind of check that out if you're interested in one that is already up and thriving. I'm a member of that makerspace. We have a very collaborative relationship, and intend to continue to do so as the concept comes into Saratoga. But at this point, this is an idea that really started to get legs at the end of December. So in January, I started to get kind of excited about the possibility of it actually becoming a reality. Spoke to Chris at the last meeting, and he gave me the opportunity to come up and spend a few minutes here, because obviously this group is a prime constituency for the makerspace in terms of either memberships or members or contributors or partners. It's meant to be an incredibly fluid social structure. So I guess that's my introduction to the concept, and the stage that I'm at now is having, kind of floated it past just a very small number of people. I've been busy working with suppliers to try to, manage the cost of bringing in all this equipment. And the numbers are starting to look good enough that I felt it was, time to kind of raise the profile and introduce it to the community and invite certainly any questions right now, but also invite you to reach out to me tonight or following up with my contact info just to talk about it. If you're interested, if you want to participate, or if you want to share ideas, I'm hoping to hear from you. Yes, ma'am.
I have a request.
Yes.
Device library. We had one for you just accepted donations from people, or old mobile devices for testing web design. I would pay to come to use it for that. That would be awesome. You know what I'm talking about?
Do you mean like if you just do a web design and then you want to device it across all platforms?
Devices. I want to test apps. I want to test my website.
Sure.
I want to test features and building. Yeah.
Okay, so that's actually, no, that's great. That's great to hear, because that's the sort of need that we're hoping to kind of surface in this community and with these conversations. So, for example, that's not necessarily something that I have scoped, but part of this too is that a lot of the service and a lot of the value comes from the members themselves. So if you have that need, although this makerspace may not at the outset support it unless a lot of other folks describe that kind of need as well, I bet there's someone or a few people in the community who would be interested in helping you out with that.
Out of curiosity, who might be interested in it? Okay.
Yes? All right. So that's what I'm hoping is that, maybe, in fact, perhaps next month, if you're looking to, fill your slate, maybe between now and then, we can start to get a real conversation going and define what those needs are. Okay, thanks. Is this ringing anybody's bells? Should I keep thinking that this is a great idea? What do you guys think?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Does the one in Troy, do they have a lot of support or collaboration with RPI?
It is, absolutely. They are staffed by a lot of alumni from RPI. By staffed, they have a volunteer. It's an entirely volunteer organization, so they have volunteer staff, and then a lot of the membership comes from RPI as well. They don't actually have a formal institutional relationship with RPI, but I think that's kind of been an ongoing conversation. They are formally aligned with Hudson Valley Community College, and they're also significantly backed by Troy Economic Development, Rensselaer County IDA, and those groups as well. Yes.
Does anyone try to get GE on board?
I think actually what's happening, I don't know, well, GE has actually their own innovation lab that they launched. It's not here locally. It's in, I want to say Lexington, Kentucky, or something.
Yeah, what was GE Appliance, and GE Appliance was bought out by a European appliance maker.
Okay.
But we still have good GE design course down in Schenectady. I think it would be worthwhile trying to get some interest going.
That's a great idea.
I mean, GE's big interest is that makerspaces can prototype a lot faster than their own divisions can.
Yep.
So they have some other examples of how designers in that particular makerspace were able to bring to fruition ideas that they had in their own corporate meetings but weren't able to accomplish because of timelines and budgets.
Absolutely, yeah.
I think that we've gotten to somebody, I mean, GE's already familiar with the concept. They should be willing to jump on board.
I think you're probably right. Yeah, I know down in the Schenectady area, aside from the makerspace that exists in Troy, I know there are also a few people who are thinking along the same lines. So, and I think they're frankly more than I are kind of tied into that community. But certainly, it can be part of the the plan. And that's another interesting point too. Is the makerspace kind of, from what I've noticed, and I've been trying to study these the past year or so around the country and a little bit in Europe. They kind of are reflective of their communities. So in Schenectady and in Troy, where you've got that heavy engineering community, it's very focused on the inventive scientific discovery and invention and prototyping and patenting and that sort of a thing, and then ultimately product distribution. I don't know that we have that strong of a hardware, I guess would be the right word. I don't know if we have that strong of a hardware community here. tell me if I'm wrong, because that's what I'm trying to figure out. What should the model look like? Maybe we develop a cooperative discussion with those other entities. I think what we'll end up having here in the region is a network of cooperative makerspaces. So I think part of the goal now is to figure out here in Saratoga to create something that brings that in, but also attracts maybe non-technical people. A lot of design folks. We have a strong design community here as well. We've got to try to figure out what's the right atmosphere and what's the right set of resources. Any other thoughts? Sure.
I'm curious how you merge like two distinct genres into one workspace. Like if you have woodworking and metalworking and metal arts, but then say up here in Saratoga you primarily have software development.
Mm-hmm.
You look and basically you're subdividing a larger space, part of it's offices and part of it's a workshop.
Yeah, it's going to definitely depend on the space. In most cases, it's like just one big, like this, just one big raw space. And so, yes, you'd have like a clean, not really a clean room, clean tech, but clean area and a fairly quiet area with kind of a buffer zone in the middle, so you can have meetings and things like that.
Because is that a concern? Is that you got people who will say want to focus primarily on design and development,
right?
Being disturbed by someone working on metal.
Exactly. Yeah, and it is noisy. It's incredibly noisy, and it's big.
Does welding and metal arts include plastic?
It can if somebody's interested in. Yes, absolutely.
I'll bring my own angle.
Okay, thank you. And that's the spirit. This is something that is incredibly collaborative. I'm trying so far by myself, but not for long. It's definitely not something I can do by myself. So we've got to get some traction on it, but trying to get some of that equipment in place. But it is definitely going to take as you say, bring your own or pitch in and share. This is I can't believe I haven't even said that word yet. A huge part of this is about the sharing economy and trying to get people in that mindset of sharing their resources and collaborating and understanding that it's not necessarily about ownership, but about access and the value that you get from that. We good?
Good.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for your time. Thanks.
That was great. When Shannon approached me last month, I was like, whoa, that is awesome. This is exactly what we need, and this is exactly what Sharatoga is about. And the collaborative approach that she's taking to it, the talking to the community, trying to build support. I love that you mentioned share, since that's Sharatoga's kind of concept to bring the community together. Figuring out who your resources are in the area to be able to help leverage them, to help figure out what your audience wants. That's everything that we did with the co-working space 9-10 months before we even opened. And I think that you found an awesome approach, so I look forward to updates in future months. So next up is Natalie. She probably didn't know she was next, but while she's sitting up here, I want to try something a little bit new. I've seen this at a couple other meetups like that. So if everyone can turn to your left or your right, or someone that you don't know or you haven't spoken with in a while, introduce yourself. Just want to kind of get to know more people. I saw that in the back. All right, so I realize I just asked everyone to talk, and now I'm going to say, let's go ahead and do the presentation. So next up is Natalie. Natalie's going to talk about managing a team remote, and then we're actually going to break for like 5-10 minutes, go to the bar, do whatever you got to do, talk to the person next to you, continue your conversation, and then we'll be back for our last two presenters. So round of applause for Natalie.
Hi. My name is Natalie. I am talking about so you want to manage a remote team. Also, all of the fonts are a little bit messed up, so just keep that in mind that I didn't pick this, all right? This is me with my cat. I have a cat. I talk about him a lot. All right, I'm a project manager. I have worked in-house. I've worked at an agency, a couple of agencies. Currently, I'm a contractor, and I work remotely. So as you can see, I'm an adult. I get paid to wear pajamas most of the day, hang out with my cat, talk about hanging out with my cat. But really, I've had sort of like a full spectrum experience of working for different teams. And it's always a learning experience, but I thought today would be a good time to talk about working remotely, the different challenges you can have while managing a team, and how to sort of overcome that. So first off, why would you even want a remote team? Maybe you need different skill sets that you can't find locally or that are kind of hard to come by. Maybe you don't want to be restricted by the geography in your region, whether it's for really specific skills or really broad skills. Working and hiring remotely allows you to sort of cross all of those barriers and work with people who can fit any sort of spec for your project and really, get the best of the best if you want that. Sometimes people need more capacity and can't find anyone locally, and you want to just hire someone right away to start working no matter where they are. Or you need something done faster, cheaper. Outsourcing is a form of remote work. And sometimes that's just something that needs to happen. I know not everyone loves it. Sometimes it's not best practices, but outsourcing teams is something that happens. So what should you expect from a remote team? So on here I have managing versus working remotely, because there's a little bit of a difference. Does anyone here currently work remotely? Oh, wow. Nice. Okay, so like maybe about half of you. This is awesome. So there's quite a few differences between managing a remote team and being on a remote team, and it's more building on the skills of working remotely than something that's totally differently. So being on a remote team, you need to have a really good personal workflow. That was one of the first things I found working with people and working myself remotely. It's a lot harder. You're not around people who are talking about what their schedule is like all the time. You're not seeing how people are setting up their emails or their files or their filters or even how they get things done. So you really need to be able to find a solid workflow and stick to it and tweak it when needed, and also not let that get in the way of doing the work when you're changing that. Getting to know people is a lot different. When you're on a team, you're not going to be interacting with people face to face as regularly. You might be having video calls. It might be all chat-based. You might be across different time zones, so it might be really asynchronous, and it's a little harder to get the feeling of what someone's personality is like that way. So that's always a challenge to overcome. Understanding hierarchy is sometimes a little more convoluted remotely. You're not necessarily seeing who's in an office and who's in an open workspace. You're not always around bosses or understanding what those conversations are, who those people are, what they look like. And expectations, setting and keeping them is a lot different. It's a lot more upfront, and you have to be very clear. And a lot of people don't find that natural, especially in a remote environment. It's a lot less unnatural. It's a lot more of asking questions and sort of getting in front of people, whether it's chat or email, and making yourself known. And that kind of goes along with if you don't have enough work or you don't know what you're doing, you really have to make that effort to ask about it, because you're not necessarily going to be stopping by someone's desk for lunch and happen to mention that you don't really know what this problem is that you're working on. So on the management side, it's sort of all of those things. Plus you have to make sure you're upfront with the people you're working with on what you expect. If you have a deadline that's a really, really hard deadline, you really need to make that clear, because when you're working remotely, people can check out a lot easier. If something is difficult or scary, some people might have a tendency to just sign off and disappear. And in that case, you maybe didn't make the right hiring decision, but also it's something you have to deal with. So being really clear and upfront and documenting that, whether it's in chat or email, and saying, hey, this deadline is coming up next week. The client has an event that's launching that references the site, so it has to happen. And then making sure that's disseminated to the team is really important. Keeping everyone in the loop becomes a lot more important as a manager on a remote team, because, again, it's not as natural to be having these conversations, in the hallway, at lunch, at the end of a meeting. Really letting people know what's going on. If you launched a really cool website and only half of your team worked on it, let everyone know. Let them all feel proud and know what their company worked on and what all of their coworkers were involved in. And that goes on the opposite side, where if something goes wrong, having those conversations publicly is really helpful to see where that went wrong, how that can be avoided in the future, and keeping everyone in the same context of where the company is at. Asynchronous communication becomes really important as a manager, because you might be working with people across time zones or across just different geographic areas. They might be taking the flexibility of working from home to go to their kids' dance recital, or check out early to go to a tech talk. So making sure you're keeping people up to date in a way that's asynchronous as well as regular chat programs or things like that is really helpful. I also added in customer buy-in or not and cultural differences as something that's kind of important from a management standpoint. This becomes important if you're outsourcing to another country, but also if you just have people across many time zones. A lot of times a client might need a meeting right away or a call right away, and they won't necessarily understand, why it's so hard to coordinate 3 people's schedules. You're not all going into a conference room together, so it makes it a lot more difficult to make it work. So just making sure your client understands the nature of your team and why you chose to have a team across many time zones, getting the best of the best, not being restricted by geography, being able to understand all of those different facets of what your client does is really important. So the tools that make this happen, a chat program is so key because you need a way to chat with people very, very informally. This is where you get to know people. You can chat publicly about your favorite music to listen to while working. You can talk about the website you just launched. You can talk about any issues coming up, any vacation time. I work with a few teams who have an entire channel just directly related to checking in and out of work, saying, hey, I'm going to hit the road for a few hours. I'll be back later. So you're held a little bit responsible for that, and you're able to know where people are at. PM software, this is sort of obvious, but not a lot of people do this. Having some way to document every aspect of a project, all of the open tasks, all of the documentation you get when you start the project, whether that's a contract, specs, files they send you, any of their expectations, questions where you can discuss things, all of that is really important. Something like Basecamp or Breeze or any software like that. Video conference and call tool. This is important. Most people use like Google Hangouts, something like that, but having something that you always use for things like daily scrums, check-ins, client communication, if you need to screen share, having something already in your wheelhouse that you can go to so you don't have to think about what program will work, just going right towards that. And of course, screen sharing capabilities, as I mentioned. So the pros and cons. There's some really great advantages to working remotely or managing a team remotely. You can take on new projects that need different skills and deliverables pretty much at any point. You have the availability to hire people who can do whatever you need to, and you're not restricted by who's in your region. You can add new skills and thinking to the team. Again, people who might not always be available locally are now available to you if you're on a remote team. And flexibility with projects and lifestyle. This leads to sort of a no restrictions work area, sort of, where you can really integrate what you're doing with the most beneficial times for all of the people on your team to work and for them to get things done. But there's also some disadvantages to that. It might be difficult to onboard people who are new. For instance, getting them to know the team, getting them to get to know the tools. And that's really where video conferencing, screen sharing, public chat, things like that really come into play. It's very unnatural to sort of get to know someone remotely. You have to almost force your way in, especially as a manager, saying, hey, how are you today? Do you have any questions? Do you have any issues? How's your timeline looking? Do you know these other developers or designers who have just come on board? Do you want to get to know them? Do you want to meet them? When you work remotely, the tendency is sort of to pull back from all of that, and I think a lot of people might gravitate towards that. But as a manager, you really want to pull people out of their computers and into the interaction you're having as a team. So the real main issues you might come across are these three. Communicating everything. You really need to be clear. Like I said, any sort of deadline that is coming up, any issues, if people do a good job, make sure you're really clear in that communication. Things can be taken so differently when it's written rather than in person. You're missing a lot of things like tone of voice, facial expressions if you're not on a video call, even just sort of like a sigh, like, oh crap, that's coming up. So really be clear and strive to get clear answers from your team. If you really need to ask for follow-up questions, do it. It's your job. But also, it's not annoying if you're getting what you need from it. Taking conflict offline can be a little trickier. Again, you're missing all of that context that's there, you know, why people are upset or why something happened, why there's tension. So being able to do something like go one-on-one on a video call, schedule a voice call, find a way to really remove someone from a situation and get to know them and their issue better is really helpful. And again, documenting everything. If you have people across time zones, they might not necessarily always be there to see what's going on right in the moment. So having a way, like a project management tool or sort of weekly reviews, you know, through a Google form or something like that is really, really helpful to be able to have your team all participate and be able to reference everything. So the last sort of bit, keep in mind, really be conscious of teams across time zones. That includes not just time differences between yourself and your clients and your team, but also different holidays if people are in different countries. That kind of goes along with being really clear with communication. Understand when people are available and when they're not. Understand when they might be taking some time off for family and when they're not. Be really good about conflict resolution. I think I kind of went over that in the last slide. Get to know people, force your way into their lives, ask them questions, make them get to know each other, share funny GIFs, funny videos, music videos, you know, really get people talking, and it becomes a fun environment to log into every day. And let your clients know. You don't really want your clients to wonder why everyone's logging in at different times to solve an issue if a big issue comes up. And it's better to let them know that you're doing this for their own good. You have a fantastic team across many states or countries because you're going to be able to deliver them the best that way. So keeping the clients in the loop is always key. So go forth and work remotely.
Any questions for Natalie?
Sure.
Natalie,
Hi.
do you have any suggestions for bringing people who are new to the working remote environment that used to be in a highly supervised environment? Any suggestions on how to do that successfully?
So he asked, do I have any recommendations for bringing people who are used to working in an office environment into a remote environment successfully? I think the main thing there is, again, communication, maybe setting up regular check-ins weekly, daily if needed, to make sure everything's going as planned. And I'm sure there will be lots of questions about not only tools, but communication styles, hierarchy, documentation, even things like getting access to files that are needed, and being able to check in regularly and see if someone's comfortable with how that's going and getting those questions. I actually have worked for a company also that assigned people in like 2 to 4 hour blocks your first few days and walked you through not only setting up your own environment, setting up your own chat tools and email and filters for email or tickets or things like that, but also just shared their vision of the company culture, and that was super helpful. Getting like multiple people's perspectives on what their company is like and why they love it and what issues they've faced, and then you get sort of a broader spectrum that you might not get when you're remote and just starting, but it's almost like getting to know a team over lunch or something like that. That's been really helpful. Any other questions?
All right, another applause for Natalie.
Thank you.
Did I also mention it's her birthday, just to kind of blow up your spot? So, first drink's on me for Natalie, but then afterwards, everybody chip in.
I still owe you a burrito.
Which I will take that burrito sometime. So, all right, we're going to break for like 5-10 minutes, so try and get back here, and then we've got 2 more presenters, and our last presenter is going to actually have a video game demo. So that'll kind of close out our evening. So 10-minute break. Meet you back here. All right, so the real quick announcement, 2 lovely ladies from the audience thought this would be an awesome venue to kind of announce their open source festival at SUNY Albany. I'm literally going to read off a sheet. It's Wednesday, April 15th. It's at SUNY Albany. And the concept is, are you working on an open source application? It's kind of going to be like a festival where there'll be a bunch of different booths. Some different speakers. A person from Google, actually that's part of the Makerspace initiative at Google, will actually be in attendance. So Shannon, we want to connect you, obviously. Love how that works out. And actually, they're actually going to come back in March and do like a 5-10 minute presentation more about their event, which again is April 15th. So kind of just want to give that a shout out. We will be tweeting this tonight at some point. I don't know where Sarah is in the back. So, okay, so make sure Sarah gets that, and we're going to tweet that out there. And we'll put more of it out on our website. It'll be in the next meetup that'll go out when I make the next meetup tomorrow-ish. So, all right, so next up is Mubs. He's our monthly Mad Glory person that we rope in every single month. So he's going to actually do a quick presentation on the importance of side projects and a tiny segue. When he and I were talking about, hey, what's a good topic for it? He's like, well, you know, I'm working on this side project right now. I'm always working on side projects. And I'm like, oh, me too. He's like, yeah, I think it's important as an outlet kind of for creativity, because a lot of our side projects turn into startups. That happened to me. And then you do the startup, and it's a lot of fun, and then it starts to grow, and then it gets to be a business, and then you're running a business, and it's not as much fun. But you know, so then you go looking for that next something to put all your energy and your heart and dreams into, what keeps you up late at night and working on the weekends, and that becomes your side project, and then that grows into a business, and then we have lots of business. Which is kind of the idea of the ecosystem here in Saratoga Tech Scene, is to grow some of our side businesses into full-fledged businesses, raise capital if necessary, and then blossom into their own startups. So, without further ado, Mubs.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for coming out to hear my lovely English accent as well. And if you follow me on Twitter, you'll understand that. As Chris said, I work at Mad Glory. We're a little software agency. We build websites and software. We're actually just across the street, just on top of the Parkside Eatery. We're about 3 years old, and we've gone from working in our houses, just taking a wild stab in the dark as to something that might work out. We're now up to 15 to 20 people, depending if you count freelancers and things like that. So in a pretty short time, I think we're doing pretty amazingly. A little bit more about me. I've been building software specifically for the internet for about 20 years. I started out doing a sports startup over in England, moved to San Francisco, moved to New York City, eventually met my wife, and we decided to start a family, and New York was way too expensive, so we ended up here. She's from upstate New York as well, so that kind of explains a little bit why we're here. But I think here is a really good place to kind of have that life-work balance that people are kind of striving for. You kind of get to work on really cool stuff, work with really talented people, but not being in a big city, you get to have the house and, you know, all the sort of amenities that comes with that. So I'm very happy to be here, and I'm happy everybody else is here too. But here we're talking about side projects. So like Chris mentioned, is like sometimes you get stuck at the job, even though you're working at an amazing company writing amazing software for lots of people. I personally always have this little niggling thing in the background. So it would be kind of cool to just go build this piece of software that does that, because I need it, and it doesn't exist. And if it doesn't exist, why not? But so I went around and looked around. So what exactly is a side project? And I found this definition on Wikipedia, and it actually relates back to the music industry, where musicians in a band would kind of take some time away from who they worked with regularly, just to do other things, just to have fun, switch styles and things like that. And as I thought about it some more, I found that applied to what we do in the software industry as well. So I think about, why do you do side projects? Well, you want to experiment with a new technology or a new technique. So for example, you know, you want to at your job you're using MySQL as a database to store information, but you want to try something new. You want to use an SQL database, or you want to use Postgres instead. In a side project, you can use whatever you want. You're not tied to what your organization is using, or you're not tied to the way of doing things within your company. You can kind of do whatever you want to do. So you're free to experiment with all of the technologies and techniques that you think are interesting. You get to have some fun. So, I mean, I know a lot of designers here, they get stuck doing a specific style of website. It's all straight lines and has a specific color scheme, and you have to have the header here and the footer here, and you have to have 2 columns, and you're kind of stuck in that rut. if you're doing a side project, it could be a website for your kids' soccer team, or it could be anything. But you're free there to kind of have fun with that and have a complete different style. Use wacky colors instead of the white and the blue that you have to use everywhere else. You can use yellows and greens and pinks even if you wanted to. So I think that's an important part of a side project. Another thing that I found is that when you're in a company and you're working with a team, it can be very difficult to get exposure outside of that organization. So to kind of make people aware of what you're doing and how you're doing it, and because as part of a team, you don't want to stick your hand up and say, "Hey, I did this." But when you're doing a side project, it's yours. So you should stick your hand up and say, "I did this," because it was entirely you. Or if you're working with somebody, it's a little team that you can make people aware of what you're doing and how you're doing it, all that kind of stuff. You can also use it if you want to make a little extra cash. If you put out a website that's, let's say you make a theme for WordPress, you can put it out, you can sell it, you can make a little bit extra money too, which never hurts. So after I thought, I do a lot of side projects, but I thought there must be some other examples of side projects that turned into something pretty amazing. So I went looking around and I found a few examples of things that you guys might have heard of. So Groupon, I think everybody's probably heard of, was actually a side project by Andrew Mason while he was working on a website that was kind of like Kickstarter. It was called The Point, and it was meant to be that you would raise a certain amount of money, and if you would try and raise a certain amount of money, and you reach that mark, then you would fund the project just like you do on Kickstarter. I think this was started around the same time as Kickstarter. But while he was working on that, he decided, it'd be kind of cool to just go and have these kind of flash sales that worked on the same kind of concept. If you sold a certain number of these products on sale, then everybody got that product at that lower price. He put it out while he was working on The Point, and now The Point is no longer, and Groupon everybody's heard of. So that worked out. Twitter, which I use every day, and I would imagine most of you use every day as well, was actually started as a side project by Jack Dorsey while he worked at Odeo. And Odeo was a platform for people to broadcast or to manage their podcasts. And podcasting, while it's fairly popular, not quite as popular as Twitter is now. And Jack Dorsey is an amazing guy. He's actually left Twitter and he now runs Square, which you may have also heard of. So the developers in the room and probably the project managers who will have heard of Basecamp and Ruby on Rails, which is a big part of what 37 Signals is known for. But they were also just started a side project. 37 Signals was just an agency doing websites for other people. They needed a piece of software to be able to manage that process, and they didn't find one that they were happy with, so they wrote their own. And now recently, 37 Signals has changed their name, and they're now known as Basecamp. So a side project is now the project. Something for you guys who aren't necessarily into software and stuff. Cards Against Humanity is a very fun card game, and it was started by 8 friends from they were an alumni from high school. They all sat down one night and they came up with this idea to play this Cards Against Humanity game. They ended up funding the project on Kickstarter to make like the high quality versions of it, and now these guys work on Cards Against Humanity. They don't have other jobs. That's all they do now. It's another amazing story. And one final one, Uber, you may have heard of. Unfortunately, not really available around here yet. But if you go down to New York or San Francisco, anything like that, Uber is fantastic. And it was actually started by the CEO of Stumble Upon, which is actually still doing amazingly well as well. But Uber is, I believe, going to take over the world, it seems like. So those are some examples of pretty big successes of side projects. But as I mentioned, I work on one or two, and you may have heard of one or two of them. So this morning I woke up and I checked my phone as I do, and I probably shouldn't do. I checked my email and my Google Analytics and stuff like that. And I woke up and one of my sites had 50 people on it. 50 people? Well, why are they on my website all of a sudden? But it was this website called Symbolism. And I wrote this thing in 2008 originally. And it's a very simple concept. I wanted to get an idea of what colors people associated with words, and specifically emotions at the time. So I was trying to make some new websites, and I was trying to figure out like what colors should I use to evoke. So I wanted to have a website that was trustworthy, or I wanted to have a website that was happy. So what colors should I use, and what colors should I stay away from? I didn't know. I had some ideas, but I wasn't sure. And so I built a website which basically just puts up a little question for people. They see a word, and then they select the color that they think is associated with that word. I put it out there in 2008, and it did pretty well. It got some tweet. It got featured on Mashable and Swiss Miss and a whole bunch of other blogs and things like that. Last weekend, I went back to it, and I was like, I should probably update this. It's been a few years since I worked on this thing. So I made it all responsive and all that kind of fun stuff that people talk about now. And I let people know that, hey, I've updated it, and this morning there was 50 people on the website. But as I've just highlighted here, in those 7-8 years that it's been live now, it's now actually 750,000 votes have occurred on the website. So I've started to build up this big database of words and their meanings, and hopefully I can do some interesting things with kind of understanding what people are actually thinking when they look at a particular color or even see a particular word as well. So that was one of my side projects. Another one, I started this with a friend of mine, Jack. I don't know if he's here. He's over there. He said he was going to come. So this was done about 3 years ago. Jack and I were talking, and we're like, wow, all these CMSs, they're so big and bloated, and you need to set up databases, and they all require these big, massive servers to run. Wouldn't it be cool if we had a CMS that was just files? And so we kicked around the idea for a little bit. Jack wrote some code, I wrote some code, I sent it to him, he sent it back to me. So we kind of did this thing in a few weeks, working in evenings and weekends and stuff like that. And we came up with this idea of using flat files. It was still going to be dynamic, but it wouldn't use a database. And we spent a few weeks, maybe months, working on it, and then we kind of pushed it out to the world, just kind of see what they would think about it. And Jack is now still working on Stautomic. He has some people helping him work with Stautomic, so we've achieved that dream of taking a side project and turning it into a real project. And it now powers hundreds, if not thousands of sites. But you may have heard of the great Content. Asana is another company that's using it to power their websites, and Mark Polton, who's a designer over from England, is also using it as well. So that was a pretty fun side project. And this is actually my latest side project. Over Christmas break, I kind of had this idea of I was listening to a podcast, and it was an interview with somebody who was working on a startup, and he was talking about like the marketing that he was doing for his website, and it was an interesting conversation. And then I listened to a different podcast, and it had the same person on it, but he was talking about how he made his website responsive and why he chose to make it responsive and all sorts of things like that. And I was like, wow, this is really cool. I wonder what other podcasts this person has appeared on and what other things that they've spoken about. And I hunted and searched and couldn't find anything. And so it didn't exist. I wanted it, and so I made it. So Interviewed was a fun project because it really helped me. I put a lot of effort into thinking about, okay, if I make this website, and I don't usually do this on the stuff I work at my day job, but I was like, how do I want to let the world know that this thing exists? I think people will find this interesting, and they should know about it, and I should tell them about it, but how do I do that? I didn't really know about that stuff. So I started reading, and people started telling me about growth hacking. I don't know what that means still, but I read a lot about it. And so I did use some of the techniques that I found while I was reading about it, just in terms of making a list, an email list, and kind of techniques for emailing the right people and using the right words and phrases to make them pay attention to kind of what you're saying. And so when I launched it, I actually managed to get interviewed on the day I launched it onto a new website called Product Hunt, which is actually not that new as it turned out. I thought it was pretty new. It was about a year old, but it's just right now it's kind of like the hot Silicon Valley startup. And it's funny because their job is to help you find other hot startups. So it managed to get like 233, I think it votes is right now. I actually managed to get my hands on the email address of an editor over at The Next Web, and they were kind enough to write about Interviewed as well. So in that first weekend that it was live, a side project that I worked on probably for about 4 weeks, was seen by about 5,000 people just in that first week that it was live. I don't know where this is going to end up yet, but it's a side project for now. But hopefully it will become something a lot more. But that, for me, is why it's important to kind of do side projects, and happy to answer any questions. Hi.
How many hours a week do you spend on side projects?
Well, it varies, but I probably spend 2 or 3 hours a day on side projects, and that's usually from about 11 o'clock onwards.
When do you go to bed most?
Well, I said last night, I was joking, I was like, I went to bed at 1 o'clock. It was like having 2 nights worth of sleep in one night. But I typically go to bed about 3 o'clock.
When do you wake up?
Depending on when the kids wake me up, so maybe like 6:30ish.
What's every night? When do you play League? Yeah. At work.
I haven't been playing as much, actually, unfortunately.
And what happens at 11 o'clock that you start?
Everybody else is asleep.
That's what.
And it's funny because I actually found, even when I was in high school and college and stuff, I was most productive in those hours anyway. Maybe it's because less interruptions, or maybe it's nighttime. I put my headphones on, I listen to music, and you just start cranking out code at that point. Yes, yeah.
Well, you sort of more hacker than used to run hack nights, right?
Yeah, we used to do Hack Assist. It was cool. It was just something I wanted to do to help people if they were stuck on a project and they needed help in anything, be design or development, stuff like that. We got a little bit busy. I got a little busy with side project work, got a little bit busy, and they haven't happened. If there's an interest in having those again, I'm sure we can organize. I can rope the Mad Glory guys into helping with those again, because we used to have them at the office. So yeah, I mean, if there's an interest, I'm sure we can organize an event again. Just tweet me if you're interested, and I guess we'll make it happen. Yeah, anything else?
Any other questions?
All right, round of applause. Thank you. All right, next up is Daniel. We're going to kind of set up here real quick. Daniel's going to talk about video games, a labor of love. So he is actually with his partner out in California, in where?
Santa Fe.
Santa Fe. Is actually developing a video game. So right here in Saratoga, in his spare time, let's call it side project, with his business partner out in California. So it kind of incorporates that. He's working remote a little bit. So I'm super excited to hear about how video games are created.
All right, so this is my first time really speaking in front of a crowd, so excuse any hiccups along the way. Video games, and it was a labor of love, and it still is, but it's really more about rebirth of the Renaissance man. With the advent of indie gaming, we're really looking at people who have to do everything. While I'm a big fan of focusing on a particular thing and within a larger company, on a smaller scale, you really have to be able to be the artist, the musician, the programmer, marketer, entrepreneur, and anything else involved with running a business. So this is going to, there's so much that goes into game development. This is going to touch on a little bit of everything. We are All Father Studios. I'm 51% of it. And actually my business partner in Santa Fe is listening in on Skype right now. He's muted so that his nieces don't interrupt us. All Father Studios, we just picked the name because it kind of sounded cool, so why not? Mike and I had met in college. We both have degrees in game design, and our entire college education was online. So for the last 4 years, I've never actually met this guy. So hopefully he's cool, right? Just to give you an idea of Mike, this awkward-looking gentleman is Mike. Yeah. It's a good question. He could have been catfishing me for the last 4 years, for all I know. Mike is, we're a two-man team. Like I said, we graduated together back in June. He was my class's salutatorian. So, I guess second place is the first place loser in some cases, but worked out for me. He is more technically oriented than I am when it comes to the programming and the level design, and he's actually a way better musician than I am. So while we have many of the same skills, we specialize in different skills. In almost every project we were in college, I was almost always the producer of our projects, or the man in charge, or the man responsible for kicking everyone else in the ass and making sure our projects were in time. So, that's Mike. Hi, Mike. I actually had a short trailer of our game, which, considering there's no intercom system or anything like that, might be kind of quiet. Oh, no, there we go. There's our short teaser trailer. The Decker Records is based off of classic Super Nintendo role-playing games, specifically Japanese role-playing games. They were very almost on-rails affairs, heavy, narrative-based, lots of menus, text, reading. It's not about running around and shooting your friend in the face like Call of Duty. This is more about adopting the role of a character and experiencing a story. We went with retro graphics, retro aesthetics, not only because it's popular right now, and Wired just had a really good article on the rebirth of the JRPG, but also because it was within our realm of possibilities. Mike and I were both trained on creating games in Unreal Development Kit, which is what the huge companies use to make their AAA games, like Borderlands and Call of Duty and stuff like that. We don't have the money to create or to have a 3D modeling program, which could cost around $1,300 just for one copy. We don't have the expertise with things like Maya and 3ds Max. So we decided to, A, make a game that was narrative-based, because we both love JRPGs and we both love like the hard-boiled Chandler noir 40s fiction, and also because we're both somewhat decent artists and we could create, for instance, Decker here. which we created. We drew her. You know, we created the story. We created all the assets. Well, most of all the assets. The game did come with some pre-built assets. So to get a little more into the process, thankfully someone else covered telecommuting for me. This is fantastic. I didn't want to dwell on this too much, so this was great. Thanks for that. Obviously, Skype is huge for us. Mike is listening in on us right now. Google Drive we use for all of our documents, our statistics spreadsheets for experience distribution and level gaining. We almost rough draft the whole thing in spreadsheets on Drive to figure out experience curves, where the player is going to be, anything analytical. Our source control for our game is done through Perforce. I know some people use SVN or Tortoise SVN. We use Perforce. It's mainly what we were trained on in college. It's what we're familiar with. Perforce is fantastic. You know, you mess up something, you can always revert a single file. It's great every day. He's in Santa Fe. He's 2 hours behind me. So since we're in different time zones, it actually works out really well, because I can get my work done while he's still sleeping, and then I go to work at the bread basket. I've made some of your sandwiches. And while I'm at work, he wakes up and gets a bunch of work done during the day. And then I get out of work at 3 or 4 o'clock. He takes a break. I go home and keep working off of the files he's done already. It's actually really handy having somebody on 2 separate time zones, because RPG Maker does not support layers like UDK does. We both can't be working on the same files at the same time. So in UDK you can create layers, you can both work on the same files. This you can't. So while one person's having downtime, the other person's having uptime. And even if we both have the same uptime, we can work on different projects. We are both, and I'd love to just consider myself a Renaissance man, but for instance, I did all of this artwork right here. This is a concept art for one of our characters called Herschel. And then Mike was doing the music over there in GarageBand. The music you heard for the trailer, I actually did through GarageBand. We split the music about 50-50. He creates most of his from scratch. I do most of mine from loops, because I'm not a musician. I'm a somewhat passable artist, but it's good enough for this genre. We capture the basis of the anime style, but we literally do everything. You know, art, music, code, design, level design, analytics, usability, testing, which we need to expand our testing pool significantly. But everything from the ground up. It's up to us. We were hoping to get our Kickstarter funded, which actually ends tonight, and it's probably going to fail, mainly so that we can outsource some of this work. We were hoping to maybe get some artists. We were hoping to get some musicians so that we can focus on the core game. It's looking like that might not happen, so we're just going to keep on trucking and doing everything ourselves, and the only thing that's really going to suffer is just going to push back our development time a little bit, and maybe our quality as far as the music's concerned. As far as making the game itself, we follow a pretty traditional development cycle. I know a lot of people do agile development. There's waterfall models. Because our game is not really an app and it's not a casual game like, say, Candy Crush. It's not something your grandma's playing while in line at the grocery store. We have to follow a more traditional development cycle. Before we started building anything, we had pre-production. We had to write the script. We wrote the entire script. We had to come up with the characters, the game ideas. There's what's called a game design document, which covers all of your core game mechanics and concepts and everything. There's a narrative design document that talks about all the backstory that most players really aren't even going to figure out, because you have to create a realistic world before you even show any of it to anyone. Then we had to design our core mechanics. Our mechanics, in this case, are really what makes your game your game. Combat, running, moving, walking, jumping, whatever. Then we got into our implementation. Once again, it's all us. Everything's all us. Implementation, testing, deployment. We are every stage of this. Within each stage, the biggest thing that we do is our rapid prototyping. Now, when you're coming up with your game idea, you need to figure out your core mechanics. Now, everyday mechanics of a game, running, jumping, shooting, almost every game has this. Our game has combat. Almost every genre of game has combat. While you're not running around and jumping, they're still fighting in our game. While that's a mechanic, and it's a very important mechanic, it's not our core mechanic. Core mechanics are what makes your game yours. If you take away your core mechanic, your game's just going to be like all the other games. In our case, our core mechanics, we have 3 primary core mechanics. Our go-it-alone system, where sometimes people want to make the game harder for themselves on purpose. It's fun. The extra challenge is good. So we want to reward those kinds of players. Some people don't want to play with 4 people in a party. They want to play with 1. So we have an option. Every time you go into a dungeon, you can go it alone. You get extra money, extra rewards, and so that your other characters don't miss out on it, when they're reintroduced back into the party, their experience gets brought up to the same as the main character. We have our satisfaction system. Performing attacks in combat will generate investigation points. We have kind of, if any of you are familiar with Final Fantasy and their limit break system, it's kind of the same thing. You take damage and you generate a bar. And when the bar gets full, you can pull off a super attack. Our super attacks generate special points, investigation points. And the other interesting thing about our satisfaction system is we kind of based it off of noir fiction. You know, the hero, he gets captured, he gets beat up a little bit in the face, in the facial area, and then, you know, he gets all the information out of the enemies while they're beating the crap out of him. He loosens the ropes and then pummels them to death. So it's kind of the same thing. As your bar fills up, you will eventually do more damage. And as your bar fills up and you perform your special attacks, you get these points that'll help you figure out the story. And these points are used with our investigation system. So when you go into certain areas, you'll be prompted, how many points do you want to use to investigate this crime scene? And depending on the number of points you use, you will find clues. And these clues, now this is where our game will differ greatly from JRPGs. JRPGs are an on-rails story. It's like you get to play the main character of a book. Our game has branching dialogue, branching storyline, areas you might never find unless you find the clue, which conceptually is an awesome idea. Practically is a pain in the balls. Or the ovaries, whatever. Because we take our time to create all of these areas that players may find, possibly, if they feel like it, if they have the time to explore, if they're the player that grinds and kills every single enemy and farms them for as many points as possible, they'll find every little nook and cranny of the game. There's the speed players who go through and try to do everything as fast as possible, and they're going to miss out on 40% of the game. We have to create a game that appeals. It can't appeal to everyone, but it has to appeal to different kinds of players within that group. We have to make a game that's interesting for the hardcore players, but not so hard that it gets the casual players to run away. We need to create all these things that make the hardcore player want to investigate everything. So it's a lot of work. And the big thing about this is our rapid prototyping. We are constantly reiterating a mechanic over and over and over again. We spend about an hour. If we have a game idea, we'll spend an hour trying to get it work. And if it doesn't work after an hour, we don't necessarily get rid of it. We shelf it. We go back to the main game. And if we have time for side projects, tying it all in, we'll go back to this idea, give it another hour, cycle through it, then go back to the main game. And then if we get our mechanic working, we'll integrate it into the game. there are a lot of ideas that didn't make it. A lot of ideas that either they made it through the prototyping cycle, but they didn't make it through the playtesting cycle, where the idea just wasn't fun. And ultimately, you can't shoehorn an idea into being fun. You know, we'll play it. It was okay. We'll have other people play it. We'll have some tissue testers play it. Some hardcore gamers play it. Every kind of tester. And ultimately, the consensus for some of our ideas were they were just crap. So we cut them. Our engine is it's built for 2D games like this. It's called, in the proud tradition of the Japanese just tacking on suffixes to everything, RPG Maker VX Ace. Not to be confused with all of the other iterations of RPG Maker, which have fewer suffixes. It's based off a Ruby script, a special kind of Ruby script called RGSS, the Ruby Game System script. And our game uses two primary ways of building. We have the global, the Ruby script itself is used to globally control the game. You have a combat system, you want that system to be the same in combat every time you get into combat. That's where the Ruby script comes in. We can make changes to that combat system and it's going to affect combat across the entire game. But our game is created as a series of set pieces. You go from scene to scene, and global scripting isn't great for that. You would have to put in so many variables and switches and triggers and everything within the script to say, just when you're here, just do this. It doesn't work so well, which is where we have our in-game editor right over there. That's where our database is. That's our database. That's our level builder. That's our graphics. That's our experience curves, our every item, every piece of armor. And when you think about a game that has 300 pieces of armor, 200 weapons, we made all 200. We made all 300. We made everything by hand. And not only do you have to do all of that by hand, you have to take into consideration how that affects the game. You can't just up the attack value of a sword, for instance, without it affecting how powerful the character is. And if they're more powerful, they're burning through a dungeon faster, which means they level faster, which means you have to make all the other creatures after that point harder. So at this point, this is going to be enough of the static slides, because frankly, it's boring. I'll get my, there we go. So I was actually considering here doing more of a live demo. Miss Selena Kyle, everybody. Let me go back into our here. All right, here we go. So here we have our perforce. Just make sure that Mike hasn't submitted anything real quick today. He has. I'm working off a local copy of the game, but as you can see here through our perforce, everything with a yellow symbol means it's a file that I need to get a new revision for. So before, if I were working on our real copy, I would have to update all of this. Doesn't take long, 30 seconds, before I do anything. Because if I work on something and without updating, there's going to be a conflict, and we have to resolve the conflict, and usually that means one of us has just wasted about 3 hours of work. Here we have the editor itself. This is our newest dungeon. We just added this to the game not too long ago. It's a completely optional dungeon. The player can skip it. They cannot skip it. If they do skip it, it's not going to affect the game really. There's no key pivotal moments in this scene. It's just something fun. If they find it, cool. If they don't, no big deal. And that's really big in video games. It doesn't sound it, but it's huge. Optional content is massive, especially American players. Even though they're playing a Japanese game, the Japanese prefer their games way more on rails, way more narrative, way more just linear. Where the American games, especially games like, for instance, Skyrim, or what's known as a Western RPG, they're all about carving out your piece of the world, creating a name for yourself. Where the Japanese games are more about, you're this person. You're going to go do this thing. That's pretty much it. Which is fun in and of itself. It's fantastic if you've got a really interesting story to tell. But the American games, it's more about creating your own story. So here we have our editor. These are our tiles. Every single one of these tiles we just basically use to paint a scene. So for instance, if I wanted to change something down here, let's say I don't like that particular kind of brick. We go here and we pretty much just change it. I can create the roof. It's pretty standard, you know. There's really nothing spectacular about it. If you want to create new assets, we go into GIMP and we'll create new assets. Here I was working on the concept art for Herschel, where we can literally go into GIMP, open up the tiles, and switch what all the tiles look like. Now, as far as controlling the game, all of these little squares you see around here, these are all called events. This is what I was talking about. These are the things that control your game on a local level. For instance, we have a water elemental. We have a variable event here. This is pretty much as your if statement in programming. If you are alone, do this attack. If you're not alone, do that. On a more complicated scale, we have up here the boss event for this scene. All of this here. All of this is logic, not only based off of if you're alone or not, but scattered around the scene, there are dead bodies, as you can quite graphically see. If you decide to spend the points, or if you have the points to spend on these bodies, your character in the game starts to get a clue that maybe there's something else going on here, especially since all the bodies have these holes around them. You got all these dead goblins, and while you're going to go through and create a lot more dead goblins on your way through the dungeon, these are special dead goblins. And if you investigate all the bodies, that boss is different based on the number of bodies you investigate. You go through, if you find no bodies, you go into the boss encounter, and you're going to be the character is going to be completely surprised. The fight's going to be harder. And not only just, so all of this here controls if you found no bodies. And then inside of that, if you were alone when you fight the boss. Here, you have 1 to 4 bodies. It's just a normal fight. You kind of knew something was coming. And then if you spend the time to investigate every single body, you get the jump on the enemy, and you get a couple rounds, you get an attack bonus, a couple rounds of free attack, stuff like that. The bodies play a much bigger role than just being an interesting mechanic or being just something you do in the game. They are what's called a sink. In the game, you have to manage the economy of the game, and not just the money, but the investigation points or the economy of the game. You don't want the player to have 80 investigation points, because then they're going to find everything everywhere. And you kind of have to protect the player against themselves. They'll create a game that's not fun for themselves and then blame you for it. So this is a way for us to get the player to use investigation points to sink it into the game. We realized at one point the player was going to have too many investigation points, so in a different scene over here, in our black market, in a less obvious way, we have a woman where you can turn your investigation points into money. So the player can manage their own economy in the game. How many investigation points do they want? Would they rather trade them for money to get better gear so they can go out and get more investigation points? Once again, like I said at the beginning, there's so much that I could cover in this about the game itself. I just want to give a really quick demo after I do this in full screen. Like I said, keep in mind the music, art, programming, everything done by us, 2 guys. Once we get classic JRPG feel, blue menus, white borders, if any of you played Final Fantasy back in the day, You know what I'm talking about. So you have to guide the player without having a screen that says, go over here, which is way too common in a lot of games. So we created this dangling rope. It wasn't in the game, we created it. If the player sees it, they can go in if they want. The next scene's not going to have any music, so any of you enjoying the music are shit out of luck on that one. Actually, never mind, it's carrying over. Do you want to go it alone? No thanks. We can go back up if we want. We don't have to. No. We got our enemies here. Typically these games have a, you don't know where the enemies are, you just walk around and you get attacked by one. We opted for a more, here are the enemies. You can fight them if you want to. So here we have our water elementals. This was custom art once again. Our combat, you got our characters. Decker's our main character, she's our investigator. Nigel's our healer. Herschel is our, what would be called the tank, if any of you play World of Warcraft. Shade is our thief. Combat's first-person perspective. This is really classic gameplay from back in the day. You go through, you assign your commands, who you want to attack. We got some magic here, we got some support. SP is our satisfaction points. When that's full, you got to perform your special attack. We got our regular special attacks. Heavy-handed, got your back. Why not? We'll just go for that. And then you can vanish. So that here's a good. What this just told me is I need to make these guys way fucking weaker. Considerably weaker. Because this is a standard level for the characters in the game right here. But here we have our satisfaction now. You got hundreds. Perform your satisfaction attacks. We got revenge. And cap them in the knee if we like. We'll just go for revenge right now. We know we took a lot of damage. We can have Herschel heal us up. This game also supports 360 controller support, by the way. So for those of you not keyboard oriented, we got controller support in here. Satisfaction. See, Herschel is Decker's former partner on the guard force. So here we've got move it along and come quietly, because he's a bit of a cop. And then Shade, since we vanished the first turn, we have a mechanic with Shade where you can vanish, you can hide from the enemies, it lowers your chance of getting hit. And while you're vanished, you can backstab for extra damage, which we stole that one straight from Dungeons and Dragons. So they killed Decker before she could perform her attack. Nigel died. Herschel died. Shade died. So what this told me is I need to go in and I need to remove the attack that kills everyone. Here's the big thing that makes our game personally better, in my opinion, and different than many of the games you see on the market today. Game over. It's done. You lost. There's no continue. There's a save system. You can save the game whenever you want, wherever you want. That's up to you. If you didn't save the game for 2 hours and you die, you just lost 2 hours of gameplay. That's it. I mean, now if I go back, I got to continue from a previous save file. So, like I said, there's so much more that can go into this, but that's pretty much the gist of it. We're looking at our Kickstarter ends tonight. We're going to keep going anyway, even if it fails. We might launch an Indiegogo campaign, because they let you keep the money you raised partway through. Kickstarter doesn't. And we have a website up. You go to allfatherstudios.com. You can actually download the demo of the game. PC only. Sorry for Mac people. Unless you're like me on a Mac running Windows. You can go. You can get our demo. The demo is the first act of the game. It's not everything in the first act of the game. It's enough to give you a taste and make you want to come back. We're looking at launch in June. We're going to release the game in 2 separate ways. We're looking at full Steam integration if you're on Steam. which will, you know, help with patching. We're not going to do microtransactions because that's fucking lame. And we're also going to release a DRM-free version of the game to kind of create groundswell for Act 2. So you can go on Steam in hopefully June or July and download our game. You can get the demo now from our website, which is DRM free. So once you download the demo, you can share it to all your friends. And that way when we show up on Steam Greenlight, give us lots of votes. And then through the DRM free, even if we release Act 1 DRM free, while we may not be getting as much money out of it, hopefully we get enough notoriety and, like I said, groundswell out of it. So that's video games for now, unless I come back later and talk about specifically more one kind of video game. Thank you.
Anyone have a few questions? One or two questions we got time for? Yes.
Oh, is it possible to do like an effective playthrough to where if you take advantage of type advantages and other mechanics within the game, you don't have to do lots of grinding?
You mean like if you're, like what do you mean for instance?
Like for example, in Mother 3, they had like the whole battle system was set up to where like if you understood rhythm, you could just keep attacking over and over up to like 16 times per one attack. So that led to throughout the game, so you didn't have to spend as much time grinding. You could just defeat the enemies more effectively. Or just, like,
Right. So instead of while we JRPGs, grinding is a big part of them. You know, back in the day, if you wanted to walk around in circles and get to level 100 before you even advance the story, that's cool. You can do that. While we are trying to protect the player from getting too far ahead in the game, we also want to give them the ability to grind. So since we have more control because we removed random battles. You don't just walk around and get jumped out of nowhere anymore. You see the enemies, you clear all the enemies in a dungeon, you have to move on. So we put in enough enemies for the grind. If you don't want to grind, you can skip the enemies by walking around them. In some areas, we do have random battles. They're explained, you know, creatures underwater, you can't see them, they jump you randomly. We also have, which I didn't show, and these aren't in the demo, class crystals. So while your character is a thief type, you give him a class crystal that turns him more into an assassin. He does more damage. He's less about stealing, more about attacking. You give him a class crystal that turns him more into a thief. He does less damage, but he steals more things from other characters. Decker, if you're into playing the game by yourself, you give him a class crystal and she can heal better, but she does less damage if you're in a party all the time. You know, we give a large amount of customization. For anybody who played Grandia, it's kind of like the egg system in Grandia.
Do the dungeons repop, or is it?
Yep, the dungeons repopulate because what we have for event control is there's two ways to make an event stop doing things. Events can trigger either as a parallel process, so they trigger while you're running the game, or events can trigger because you touch them or because you activated the action button. Here we have our magic vendor in the black market, which you can interrogate her for an investigation point. And then after you're done talking to her, there's a thing here called a self switch. Self switch will switch over to a new tab that has activate this tab if self switch A is on. Every time you come back to this dungeon, this is how the character is going to be on tab 2. Whereas in our dungeons, we have erase event. Erase event will erase the event this one time. You kill the enemy, he disappears. If you leave the map and come back, the enemy's coming back as well. Right now we don't have scaling in the game, so if you come back as level 100 to the first dungeon, the enemies aren't harder. You're just going to be able to plow through them. Any other questions?
I'm just wondering, so you said you were hoping to launch in June. How long have you been working on it?
We graduated actually June last year. We took a month off because we were kind of sick of seeing each other after 2.5 years of college. We got it was a 4-year degree, but it was through Full Sail Online, so that was the 2.5 years to get a 4-year degree. Took a month off, so we've been working on it for almost a year now. pretty much in all telecommuting. Like I said, I've never met this guy in person. He could be a 300-pound woman by the time I see him. Using a voice modulator. Hopefully, Mike, you are not a 300-pound woman. Okay, well, I guess that's it. Thank you very much.
And Daniel's going to stick around for a few minutes to talk to anybody. Anybody have any questions? One thing I failed to mention is kind of Love's idea of side projects is that we'd like to do more presentations about side projects. So while we have down in Troy the Startup Tech Valley about actual companies presenting like that, your side project is always going to hopefully be like a side project. Maybe it blossoms, but I'd love to be able to step out here, kind of bring more awareness to that. So the idea is to bring more awareness to those kind of things. Kickstarter, Indiegogo, those kind of campaigns, anything that we can, as a community, can kind of throw our support behind, I think would be awesome. So again, see me if you have any ideas for that. Like I say, there's one other. Well, I don't know what else I was going to say. We're going to continue to keep in touch with Daniel and keep tweeting out his progress. Again, his Kickstarter campaign ends tonight, but he talked to me previously about launching Indiegogo campaign and then with the launch. So look for our Twitter. We'll keep updates on that.
Say allfatherstudios.com, by the way.
Right, and we tweeted out. We got a picture of you already on there. So a few months ago, actually, I asked, hey, listen, so there's this thing called New York Tech Meetup. It's the largest tech meetup. It's actually the largest meetup in the world with something like 32,000 users. Every single month, they sell out 900 users down to NYU. You got to get tickets. It's crazy anyways. So we had the idea of going down kind of as a group, because I usually go down every month, now with kids and startups and life. I'm not getting down there as frequently as I would like, but we could just do it here. So they live stream it, thanks to MLB. So Major League Baseball video. Live streams it on the internet. So the idea would be that we would just get this room. We'd have some round tables. We'd have a projector, maybe a little bit bigger. Order dinner, some drinks. It's It's Tuesday, March 3rd, 7 p.m. until 9. Usually goes to like 8:30. It's a pretty cool thing. If anybody's ever checked it out, you can watch every single episode they've ever done. It's online, available. So that's something I'm going to do. And it might just be me in this room watching it. Or I'd love to have some other people. So the idea of just being able to order drinks, wings, watch a tech meetup, and kind of get that exposure. And then hopefully come summer, we can actually get a good group together. They rent a party bus, head down there to the city. So anyways, look for that on the meetup announcement. And thanks a lot, everyone, for coming.